today's mindful moment. Welcome back to the deep dive. Today we're gonna try to get to the bottom of something that's always been kind of a mystery to me. What does it really take to impeach a president? I mean, it's a pretty big deal, right?
Oh, yeah. It's one of the most powerful checks on executive power in our system.
Right. So we've got a book here, Impeachment: An American History. Have you had a chance to check it out?
Oh, yeah, I have. It's a fascinating look at the attempts to remove three presidents, Andrew Johnson, Richard Nixon, and Bill Clinton.
So each of those cases is really different, right?
Yeah, each case is unique, but they all reveal something about the political and social forces at play.
It's kind of like a drama unfolding, right? Like you see these power struggles, these ideological clashes, and how they shape the course of history.
That's a great way to put it. It's a drama with really high stakes, the fate of the nation hanging in the balance.
No kidding. And it all starts with the Constitution. I mean, the Constitution's impeachment clause.
Right.
It lays out the process. But the thing is, the founders intentionally left the definition of high crimes and misdemeanors super open-ended.
Yeah, they did.
You think something as serious as removing a president would require like more clarity?
You'd think so, right? But that ambiguity raises a question. Was it wise foresight on their part, providing flexibility for situations they couldn't anticipate? Or did it open the door for like partisan battles where the definition of those terms becomes a weapon?
Well, looking back, it seems like maybe a bit of both. I mean, each case we're going to look at has all these debates about what actually qualifies as an impeachable offense. Like, is maladministration enough, or do you need specific criminal acts?
Yeah, it's a really tricky question. And it's not just a legal question either, it's deeply political. The battle becomes about interpreting the Constitution itself, not just the actions of the president.
Right. Okay, so let's rewind the clock a bit. We're talking 1868, Andrew Johnson. He's the first president to be impeached. It's a really fascinating time. The nation is still reeling from the Civil War. There's all this tension over how to reintegrate the South. And Johnson, a Democrat who became president after Lincoln's assassination, finds himself at odds with the Republican-controlled Congress.
Yeah, it was a powder keg of a situation. And the Republicans saw the Tenure of Office Act, a law designed to limit Johnson's power, as a tool they could use against him. They were hoping he'd violate it and give them grounds for impeachment.
So they were kind of setting a trap.
Yeah, in a way you could say that. And when Johnson defied the act by removing Secretary of War Edwin Stanton, they pounced on it.
So was this really about upholding the law, or was it more about just getting rid of Johnson because he was a political obstacle?
Well, many historians would say that removing Johnson as a political roadblock was a primary motivator. He wanted a more lenient approach to Reconstruction, while the radical Republicans wanted to really reshape the South and ensure rights for freed slaves. They clashed big time.
So it was a purely partisan attack then?
Well, partisanship definitely played a role, but Johnson's own actions and his personality, he could be quite antagonistic towards Congress, contributed to his predicament. But get this, he almost survived the impeachment.
Really?
Yeah, it was a close call. He escaped removal by just one vote in the Senate. Can you imagine?
A single vote. Wow. What does that tell us about the process itself? I mean, does it suggest that it's like really hard to hold a president accountable, or does it mean that the system worked as intended?
It's a great question. It shows just how much tension there is between law and politics. Like, does a president have to commit an actual crime, or can they be removed for just being difficult or obstructing Congress's agenda?
Not a simple answer.
Yeah, it's not. And Johnson's case forces us to think about that ambiguity. Like, where do you draw the line?
So let's jump ahead a few decades now to the 1970s and a scandal that I'm sure everyone's heard of, Watergate.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, how does a third-rate burglary, as they called it, turn into this massive constitutional crisis? It's wild.
Well, Watergate is a story of intrigue and cover-up, where the truth just kept slowly unraveling bit by bit. It chipped away at public trust and created this feeling that the Nixon administration was operating above the law.
Yeah, like a slow drip, drip, drip of revelations, right? The break-in, the tapes, the Saturday Night Massacre. It's crazy how much came out.
Absolutely. And in the end, it wasn't just about one specific crime. It was more about this fundamental breach of trust between the president and the people.
It's like this whole pattern of lawlessness that ultimately did more damage than any single event.
Exactly. It created this feeling that the rules didn't apply to Nixon and his inner circle.
Right, and that's something that people just couldn't ignore.
And one thing that really stands out about the Watergate investigation is that it had bipartisan support.
Oh, yeah, that's right. Both parties were pretty much on the same page about the need to investigate Nixon, right?
Yeah, exactly. Democrats and Republicans both recognized just how serious the situation was, and they put country over party.
That's pretty rare, especially these days.
It is, but it was a different time back then. There was the sense that Nixon had really crossed a line and that he needed to be held accountable.
So you're saying that bipartisan approach really helped to legitimize the investigation?
Oh, absolutely. It made it harder for Nixon to dismiss it as just a partisan witch hunt.
I see. So the investigation was super thorough, right? And then there was that infamous smoking gun tape.
Oh, yeah, the tape that proved Nixon was involved in the cover-up, that was the nail in the coffin.
It's hard to argue with that kind of evidence. I mean, that pretty much sealed his fate, right?
Oh, yeah. It provided irrefutable proof that Nixon had abused his power and obstructed justice.
So it makes you wonder, does a successful impeachment always require that kind of smoking gun? Like, do you need that one piece of undeniable evidence? Or can a president be removed based on, like, the weight of the evidence, even if there's no clear-cut gotcha moment?
That's a really interesting question. It's about the burden of proof, I guess. Like, how much evidence do you need to convince people that a president needs to be removed from office?
Yeah, it's a tough one. But in Mitchen's case, the evidence was pretty overwhelming. He ended up resigning before he could be impeached by the House.
Yeah, he knew he was cornered. He'd lost the support of Congress and the American people. It's a reminder that even presidents aren't above the law.
Okay, so let's move on to our third case, Bill Clinton. This one's a little different, right? It's got this kind of tabloidy feel to it.
Yeah, the Clinton impeachment was definitely more about sex and lies than abuse of power.
Right, so we have the Lewinsky affair, a sexual relationship between the president and a White House intern. And then there's the Paula Jones lawsuit alleging sexual harassment by Clinton when he was governor of Arkansas. How do these events lead to impeachment? It seems like a bit of a leap.
Well, things got complicated during the Jones lawsuit. Clinton was under oath, and he denied having a sexual relationship with Lewinsky.
Oh, so lied under oath.
That's what his opponents argued. And then later on, evidence emerged that contradicting his testimony, so he was forced to admit that he had lied.
So that's where the perjury charge came from.
Exactly. And then there were also allegations of obstruction of justice related to his attempts to conceal the affair.
I see. And I remember this guy, Kenneth Starr. He was the independent counsel investigating Clinton, right?
Yeah, Starr had been investigating Clinton for other things, but the Lewinsky scandal gave him an opportunity to really go after the president.
So was Starr like a partisan figure?
Well, he was appointed by a Republican-controlled Congress, so yeah, you could say that. But he was also a highly respected lawyer.
So it was a politically charged situation for sure. But did Clinton actually do anything impeachable? I mean, was this really about abuse of power, or was it more about personal misconduct?
That's the million-dollar question, right? Where do you draw the line between a president's personal life and his official duties?
It's a blurry line sometimes.
Yeah, for sure. And the Clinton case really exposed that ambiguity. In the end, the House voted to impeach Clinton on charges of perjury and obstruction of justice.
So he was actually impeached.
Yeah, he was. But the Senate didn't convict him, so he remained in office.
Wow, so it was a close call for Clinton, too. The whole thing was super divisive, right?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. The country was split right down the middle. It was Democrats versus Republicans, liberals versus conservatives.
So it sounds like all three of these impeachment cases are really complex. They all raise these tough questions about what it means to hold a president accountable.
Yeah, exactly. They're all different, but they all get at the heart of our system of government. They make us think about the limits of presidential power and the role of Congress in checking that power. They're like stress tests for the Constitution, pushing it to its limits and making us confront all the ambiguities.
Yeah, like it's not just a document. It's a living thing that's constantly being interpreted and reinterpreted.
Exactly. And that's why studying these cases is so important. They give us insights that can help us understand the political landscape today.
Totally. Like we hear about impeachment all the time now, but knowing the history, the context, all the nuances, it's crucial if you want to form like an informed perspective.
It's not just about whether you agree or disagree with a particular president or their policies. It's about those big questions of accountability, justice, and how power is balanced in our government.
It's like Civics 101, but on a much deeper level.
Yeah, and it reminds us how important an informed citizenry is. Impeachment is inherently political. It's driven by public opinion and the decisions of the people we elect.
So we've covered a lot of ground here, three very different impeachment cases.
Yeah, each one unique.
What are some of the key takeaways? What really stands out to you?
Well, first off, to have a successful impeachment, you need solid evidence, something that cuts through the partisan noise and really resonates with the public.
Like Nixon's smoking gun tape.
Exactly. It can't just be politics as usual. It has to feel like a real threat to the system.
Like a true abuse of power.
Right. The charges have to be seen as genuinely dangerous to the republic. Just disliking a president's policies or personality, that's not enough.
It has to be about a violation of the oath of office, a breach of trust that goes way beyond political differences.
Exactly. And the process has to be seen as fair and impartial, not just a partisan witch hunt. That's why bipartisanship is so important, like we saw in the Nixon and Johnson cases.
It makes the whole thing seem more legitimate.
It does. When it's just one party going after the other, it undermines the whole process and erodes public trust.
It just makes everyone more cynical.
Yeah, it can really damage faith in our government. So, what's the main takeaway for our listeners? What can they learn from these stories?
Well, I think it's about being informed, forming your own opinions based on facts, not just what you hear on the news.
Exactly. Don't just accept things at face value, Look beyond the headlines and all the political rhetoric. Think critically about what's going on.
And remember, these cases are complicated. There are a lot of different perspectives and interpretations.
That's why I always recommend going back to the source material. Impeachment and American history is a great place to start. It gives you a much deeper understanding of these events.
It's a great read. And it's a good reminder that our democracy is fragile. It takes work to protect it.
Absolutely. We can't take it for granted.
So to wrap things up, I just want to encourage everyone to keep learning, keep asking questions, and keep engaging in these important conversations.
Yes, stay curious, stay informed, and stay involved.
Thanks for joining us for this deep dive into impeachment. Be sure to check out Impeachment and American History if you want to learn more. And as always, don't forget to subscribe and share this episode with your friends. Until next time, keep diving.